Aloha kako. My name is Taylor Chang, and I serve as curator of film and performance at the Honolulu Museum of Art and the Doris Duke Theater. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in this virtual space for Carrying Culture, Voices of Life, which is part of Celebrate Micronesia 2021 this year. And it's also part of an ongoing series called Carrying Culture Micronesia, which is a 3-part poetry series that features poets and poetry as carriers of culture with a focus on Micronesia, a region that is homeland to many islanders here in Hawaii. This program would not be possible without Dr. Mary Hattori, and we just send all of our gratitude to her for partnering with us and working with us to make this program possible. The Carrying Culture series is really a culmination of ongoing conversations that started around 2018, 2019, when we started brainstorming about ways we can further evolve and do better at highlighting and uplifting the life experiences, the wisdom, the leadership in the Micronesian community here at the museum. And we were thinking of how to do it through storytelling, through the spoken word, and through community discourse. And so Carrying Culture Micronesia was born. I also want to acknowledge that the title itself, Carrying Culture, is an ode to a program that the museum had a few years back that connected school teachers from the DOE with members of the Micronesian community. And we wanted to kind of keep that spirit alive somehow and further evolve it into this poetry series. And so that's kind of where the genesis of Carrying Culture began here at the museum. Celebrate Micronesia has always been this beautiful, powerful example of the brilliance of the Micronesian community in Hawaii. And so it's really an honor to be able to participate in it this year through the Carrying Culture series. It's, as I mentioned, it was 3 parts. So today's Voices of Life will feature 3 incredible women who are included in the Indigenous Literatures of Micronesia Anthology, the first ever anthology of the region. And it'll be moderated by Dr. Mary Hattori. The second installment, which will take place in June, is Voices of Our Youth, and it'll highlight youth voices in the Micronesian community. And then the third installment, which will take place in November, Voices of Solidarity, will feature poets from Hawaii, Polynesia, and Melanesia who are demonstrating solidarity with Micronesians in Hawaii in the face of rising discrimination. If you want to learn more about this program, please check out honolulumuseum.org for more info. And we really look forward to seeing you, throughout the year as this program continues to evolve. In the meantime, I would just want to pass the baton to Mary, who will be leading and guiding us through this program today. So thank you so much again for joining us, and off to you, Mary.
Thank you, Taylor. And I want to say thank you to the Honolulu Museum of Art, Doris Duke Theater. I am Mary Therese Perez Hattori from the island of Guam. I am acting director of the Pacific Islands Development Program, which is also a community partner in this 3-part series. I want to use the words of one of our great Micronesian leaders, the late great Dr. Joachim Peter. And Jojo said, the computer is our canoe. And so today we use the computer as our canoe to carry our words, our stories, and our cultures. Our stories matter, our voices matter, and carrying our cultures into the wider world matters. We come to Hawaii and the United States from Micronesia not with empty baskets waiting for a handout. We come to this state and this country with baskets full of life-affirming positive values and practices that can be used as role models, can be used to improve the societies in which we find ourselves. And so today I want to thank our poets for being here, for sharing the values that are coming through the words in their poems. And I want to welcome first Innocenta Sound-Kikku She is a community leader in Hawaii, originally from the beautiful island of Lucanor in Chuuk State, Federated States of Micronesia. 10 years of law enforcement background. She is an active advocate, storyteller, interpreter, teacher, auntie, and cultural navigator with a particular passion for women and children. Ino is the founder of the intergenerational youth program, Pacific Voices at Kokua Kalihi Valley, also vice chair of the Micronesian Health Advisory Committee. In all of this work, she plays a key role in connecting her community to resources and cultural supports and advocating for their rights to health and culture. So we welcome Inocenta.
Silent warriors. Mama Yo, a silent warrior, a familiar and comforting voice I often hear as my mind travels back to a time when her tales of many silent warriors are as vivid as her voice in my mind. Silent warrior spoke and whispered names of mother ancestors who carries virtues of love, loyalty, and respect, honor, of course. Silent warriors bravely enduring birth of a new generation. Silent warriors breathing and weaving core values, beliefs, cultures, custom, and tradition identities of their race. Silent warriors, heartbeat of a clan, key keepers and holders of honor in the land. Silent warriors, peacemakers, and builders of strong, brave, honorable champions. Silent warriors, wind blows, blowers of language, songs, and chants that drums to the beating of the island waves. Silent warriors, storytellers of tales and legends about ancestors who demands never to be forgotten. Silent warriors, hopes and wisdom of a better community, teaches respectable characters of a tribe. Silent warriors, strong or weak as sacrificing life for another life. Silent warriors, planters and nurturers of a future yet to be seen but dreamed of faithfully. Silent warriors, fragrant and aromatic peace warming the heart of our men. Silent warriors, every Chukis and Islanders, women, young and old, who understands and holds these roles and values, responsibilities wholeheartedly without a doubt. Silent warriors. Thank you very much.
Our next poet is Teresita Perez Bonio, daughter, mother, one of 3 members in a multi-generational household living in Agana Heights, Guam. Her full-time gig is teaching English composition at the university there, but sometimes she writes, and her writings can be found in a few places, including Indigenous Literatures from Micronesia and Kinalamtangi Pacificu. She also worked on retelling stories in Chamorro Legends, a gathering of stories. Terry writes to sort out her neuroses mainly and hopes that what has helped her heal might also help others. Terry.
I'm going to read the short, it's actually a short or flash fiction. Some people have called it a poem. And it's in the Indigenous Literatures from Micronesia Anthology. So I thought I'd read that for all of you today. It's called The Floating World. She rolls over on her back. Sunlight hits her hard in the face. Is it noon? Her body lies flat on a futon. The tatami's sweet grassiness revives her somewhat. Her companion also lies basking in light and then turns over to meet her. Methodically, in an exhalation, the two become entwined, an innocent mess of feet, legs, and arms, a slow coiling. They haven't slept together, she's almost sure. It's too difficult to think just yet. She opens her eyes. His body shifts. Her mouth stuck, she mumbles hello to her companion. He moans, eyes closed. They lie in her apartment, white walls with unpacked boxes atop a makeshift nylon closet. No real furniture besides futon and tatami, a kotatsu on loan from her school, a decent TV set she found in a neighbor's trash pile, and some mismatching pillows good-naturedly propped against one wall for visitors. 9 long months have gone already. Half an hour of silence later, they're lying on their bellies. His arm and leg graze her. He's reading the paper. She shifts. Propped on one elbow now, she watches him for a long stretch of time. Must be nice to understand kanji. He continues his downward glance. Long, straight hair half hides his face, his cocky half Japanese eyes, and skims his pale brown skin much like hers. His nickname around town is Keanu, and so he is, a sawed-off, less cinematic version, a well-known cad whom her hostess friends have urged she needs to. No longer half asleep now, she remembers the alley. She sat there outside the bar, jammed in with other expatriates, campfire style, like drunken Boy Scouts. A rush of liquor bottles encircled her, traveling from unidentifiable mouth to unidentifiable hand. Her vision clouded. Very soon the world faded out for her. At dawn, her stupefied senses awoke to yelling. She looked up, dimly saw a policeman in front of her. They were hurling foreign threats at her, verbally pinning her to that one lonely spot she had kept all night, utterly alone, until she heard a voice speak in a whiskey blur, in the tones of both angel and hero. Come on, get up. They want us to leave. He had been sitting there holding her hand. And just now, lying with him, gazing at him through his long hair lit by the mid-morning sun, she can quickly recall in succession the cab ride and their cat nap. Nothing sloppy was exchanged between them, nothing awkward or even situational, although Japan can be such a whore sometimes. She sighs and wonders how warm his lips might feel. And that's it.
Wow. Thanks, Terry. It's beautiful. Need to take a breath after that.
Nothing happened.
We're honored to have the co-editor of Indigenous Literatures from Micronesia with us. Also sharing her poetry now is Emelihter Kihleng, poet, curator, scholar, teacher, very inspirational woman, born on Guahan, raised in Pohnpei, Federated States of Micronesia, and in Honolulu, Hawaii. Most recently, she was a first curatorial research fellow, Oceania at Mark Museum on Rothenbaum in Hamburg, Germany. Emily earned her PhD in Pacific Studies from Victoria University of Wellington in Aotearoa, New Zealand in 2015. She currently works as a researcher and policy analyst for Senator Teresita Perez of the 36th Guam legislature. Welcome, Emily.
Kaselelia Mainko. Thank you so much, Mary, for that lovely introduction. And thank you also for organizing this event. And also thank you to Taylor and Sarah as well, and everyone else who's here today. I prepared a few poems because I thought we had 10 minutes each. I wasn't sure. So I just will read a short one from the anthology, and then I have a new one that I wanted to read, if that's okay. So uros, in case you don't know what they are Pohnpei skirts, worn, loved, sold, gifted by Lien Pohnpei or Pohnpei women. What uros say? A kachuk, right smack in the middle of her thick thighs. Neitama, kate choy, kate kasaformiye, masamao, Lien Pohnpei, Sarapinin Pohnpei, Kasilelye, Sakawan Pohnpei with a pointal underneath. Li choror. My friend sends me a bright green uros that says, Kate chek, but I can't help it. This is the English semi-translation. Is it bitter? Right smack in the middle of her thick thighs. My favorite. Don't hate. Don't ruin my form. Beautiful. Pohnpei woman. Pohnpei girl. Kasilelye. Pohnpei kava with a coconut shell underneath. A real woman. My friend sends me a bright green uros that says, ignore it, but I can't help it. This is a new poem that I wrote recently after the killing of, I remember, Skycap in Honolulu. It just made me think about some of my experiences growing up in Hawaii, and so I wrote this. Bus ride, a true story. I never want to forget that day I catch bus after class. Number 1, straight home. That day I wore one uros. I no shame. Wear my culture I like. Stay beautiful. When I went Sacred Hearts, we wore mu'umu'u on Fridays. Aloha Fridays. I love wearing mu'umu'u. I look good in mu'umu'u. All Islander titas look good in mu'umu'u. All Islander titas look good in puletasi. All Islander titas look good in uros. But most they shame for wear the Micronesian skirt. But I say, fuck 'em. So that day, I stay sitting on the bus when these Stevenson kids won't get on. They look at me, or maybe my Pohnpei skirt, or maybe both, and ask me, you Micronesian? Yeah. They ask me if I know some other Micronesians at their school. I say no. Not all Micronesians know each other. Then I went remember my cousins. They go Stevenson. Hey, you know Mona and Gina? I went ask. They Micronesian? They ask. Yeah. They stay thinking. Mona not Micronesian, the Filipino looking one say. She say she from Saipan. I know her. I laugh. She Micronesian. Saipan stay in Micronesia, I tell him. The other one, Gina, she say she want Mexican, bra? He asked his friend. Yeah, Gina, she tell everybody she Mexican. The friend laughs. Mexican? You never ask her for speak Spanish? You shoulda, I say. They laugh. They don't know what for say. They lie. They Micronesian, just like me. I tell them as we reach my stop. They don't like believe still. For real? You the cousin. I get my stop, missing my Sacred Heart days when I stay brave enough for rock, my pink comb in my hair, looking hella fierce, shameless one with the mu'umu'u. Kailangan.
Thank you, Emily. Beautiful. Thank you, Eno, Terry, and Emily. And so now we'll move into a moderated discussion. I want to start the discussion with a question to Emily about the anthology, Indigenous Literatures from Micronesia, since that is one of the connections that we all have here. So tell us a little bit about the anthology, the motivation behind it, and the story behind it, please.
Sure. Well, I'm just really excited that we're all here today and have this opportunity to share, and that so many of you are in the anthology. Well, first, I think I got the idea, well, Dr. Evelyn Flores of University of Guam, and we were the ones who kind of thought of it together. I was teaching at University of Guam with her at the time. This was more than probably 11 years ago now. And we were both in the English department, and we both were just frustrated with the lack of representation of Micronesian voices, especially in the classroom. And Dr. Flores teaches a Pacific literature course at University of Guam, and she was always working hard to include Micronesian writers and voices in her class. And we just thought, well, we just need to do an anthology together. And so we sent out a call and asked for people to submit, which was challenging. And yeah, and it took 10 years to finally come together.
Thank you. And it's such an important piece. And I want to toss a question to Eno and Terry. What does it mean to you to be in this first ever anthology of Micronesian creative writing? Why don't we start with Eno?
Wow. Thank you so much, Emily. And that is awesome. Oh, I never really think of it to be even submitting my poems and stuff. And so to have it in the literature, I was blown away. And it's really because of friends and, active members like Mary and others that pushes us to share our poems and our stories, that eventually, we started to use them. Actually, I lost like some of my books that I just scribble things on it that I usually do. And so to finally have my poems in two books, like the Value of Hawaii, I have a poem in there too. And that poem, I wrote it for my daughter because of, the things that she goes through. So I really appreciate, laying the groundwork so that we can be able to share our work. So that's exciting. And I'm just overwhelmed and excited about it. Thank you so much for creating the space. Mary, you're awesome. You always create spaces for us. Yeah.
Thank you, Eno. Eno, do you have that poem on hand?
It's actually a chant, and I did it like a rah-rah kind of chant because I'm very tomboyish before, and my auntie, I think you know her, Margarita Cholime, really tell me off and say, why are you doing that? It's too manly. You need to change it. But yeah, I can share it. Can I share it after? Because I have to look for it.
Okay, let me go to Terry. So Terry, what does this being in this anthology mean to you?
Well, I have to start at the beginning. I had when the call came out, I was really disconnected from, I didn't know anybody. I was pretty much isolated in terms of a writing community. I had just returned to Guam after I was only on Guam for 6 years. I mean, that sounds like a long time, but in terms of, if you know the islands, you can't just infiltrate stuff, even though I have family here, especially artistic community and artistic spaces. You know, I would never just like, hey guys, I'm here, I want to write. I would never do that. And so I didn't. And honestly, when I wrote that story, it was really all about nostalgia. So I was in a space and time where I was longing for something that I didn't have because I was a mother at that point. And so so midlife crisis, that story, but I wasn't that old at that point. But so when I just kind of submitted it, again, not knowing, I didn't know who Evelyn Flores was. I didn't know anybody. I was just like, okay, whatever. Here you go. I'm half Filipino. Do I still qualify as a Micronesian writer? So I turn that in. So, and then it was, they liked it, which was a really cool validation for me because I also hadn't been writing. When I gave birth, I put art and creative stuff aside and I just didn't write. I wrote a lot when I was pregnant, but I didn't write a lot after. And so it was just really focusing on family. So that was a really great thing. So that's the first impact that anthology is like, complete strangers liked my piece. That's kind of freaking, it was a blind review too, but I had no idea. And then when of course I got, I know the community. Evelyn Flores is I work with her. I know Emily, I know her mom, I know all these, I know the community, but it's still such an amazing work that it's this a labor of love. And so I'm really honored to be a part of this incredible labor of love that's necessary. It allowed my voice to be shared, my little tiny voice, but it commingles with all of these other little tiny voices, and it becomes this force to be reckoned with, I think. And it's an amazing gift that for everyone, I think. So thank you. Thank you, Emily. I don't think I've ever thanked you personally for whoever liked my piece. It's such an oddball piece. It's like, it's so one of these things just doesn't belong here kind of piece. And it deals mostly with insecurity and being insecure and not knowing your footing and liminal spaces and the in-between spaces. And to me, that, I mean, it may not be directly stated, oh, I'm an islander, I live in the liminal space, but I've always found myself being at my finest in these in-between spaces. So I think that's what that piece means, and that you saw that, or you saw something in it. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mary, for inviting me to do this panel, by the way. Shout out, yay. And Bishop Museum at people, yay. Thanks.
Thank you, Terry. I love the way you said that you're finest in the liminal spaces. I think many of us here, many of the invited special guests in the room, and the people who will be viewing this at the Celebrate Micronesia Festival feel that. And I think we can embrace that we can be at our finest in these other spaces. Because certainly being so far away from home, we do feel like we're in this sometimes awkward, sometimes hostile space where we may not feel the sense of belonging or feel that we have the opportunity to be our finest. And I think, your chant for your daughter in the value of Hawaii 3, Hulihia, sort of speaks to that. Are you ready to share?
Sure. Well, first of all, I really feel too that a lot of the misunderstanding of our place for women in our culture and with other ethnicity, just the misunderstanding of who we are. also prompted me to write that story of the poem of the silent warriors. And it saddens me when I see girls just say, put themselves down because they don't understand the importance and the values of who they are in the community and in their culture. So this was also meant to empower them. So I will share also this chant that is a calling forth for women to come together, and it's in my language. Aune, aune finchukana. Siborofengen ne, siborofengen. Liet jingu lietonge, liemiritkana. Sibwe sacha dao, sibwe sacha de. Sibwe tirolang o sibwe tirolang. Tiro fairo tonge asreki. Metanane ebwe masawan lesor. Masawan belian. Sibwe rofangan ne, sibwe rofangan. Ina mirit, ina fan, ina karere. Atiwa longomo, achima tane. Atafan, liafan, nai muri muri. Literally, this is calling of women to come together, lift our children. They are our precious children, and they are our future. The calling that you go aune is a practice that Mordlaki's women, when they know that there is a need in the community for one of their sisters, they just call that out. And when you hear it, you come be ready to support with your fishing net, and you go out together in the ocean and you fish together, and whatever the biggest of your catch and the first catches that you have, you will give it to the sister that needs it the most. And so when we started to do the chant, it's a calling on each other to come together for our children that are in the education system, to support them to be able to move forward in whatever endeavors that they need to be in. So that's what's the background of this chant. Thank you very much.
Such a beautiful chant. And I think it speaks to, again, the beautiful values and practices that we bring with us and carry forward to the new places that we call home. The theme for the Celebrate Micronesia Festival is connections. And so many of us crave connection to home. The pandemic has intensified that, with many of us unable to return home. And I want to toss the mic to Terry. I understand you have a poem that you want to share that speaks to this connection to home and homecoming.
Oh, yeah, I do. I think I need to preface the poem because I lived in Seattle for a really long time, and I gave birth to my child in Seattle. And I didn't join a diaspora community in Seattle. I kept my culture to myself. And I was very happy doing that. And it's a form of maybe adapting to the big city. It's like I knew who I was. I knew, and I think that's my obsession with nostalgia. Is like I know myself, my identity lives in my memory and my past. So I don't need to practice it in Seattle because it didn't feel right for me where it felt right for other people. I just felt, okay, no, it's not working. I need Guam for this. So compartmentalize. So I did a lot of compartmentalizing when I lived in Seattle, and I lived there, in clusters. Like I lived there for a short time, came back to Guam, then I went back and lived there for another short time, and then came back here. So, but this poem is about giving birth in Seattle and then coming home. And it's called Homecoming, and it represents, and I wrote it much like Ms. Innocenta here in that beautiful chant that you wrote for your daughter. I wrote this for my son. I carried the newborn into the city at night against the late autumn chill. Old man drunk stopped us, admired him as he slept soundly. I carried him at night. I know the spirits are dead here. I carried my newborn into the house before sunset. I poured salt, circled the home, paused in front of the limoncina tree outside his window, eyed a gorgeous spot for when the umbilical cord falls off. That's it. Like that need to go home and that need, and it's so funny. This poem came out of a space where somebody asked me to tell a story about something, and I told a story about when I came home to Guam. I knew automatically something kicked in. I took my son never left the house at night. I covered his head. I poured the salt around the house to keep the evil, the bad people that I got, because he hadn't been baptized, and I didn't even baptize him till he was like 10 or something. But anyway, so it was this idea of, I told that story and I'm like, I didn't do that in Seattle. I walked out with my kid in the city streets. It's like 10 p.m. I'm just walking around going, hi, drunks. And the drunks, they looked at him. And I'm like, what is that? What is that switch? What is that knowing that turned on without no one told me. It just turned on. And that's why I call it homecoming. It's like, I'm home. I get it. I brought this kid home. He's home.
Beautiful. Thank you. Emily and Eno, do you want to speak to that same theme of connection to home and homecoming, or being away from home?
I know I have a poem somewhere about that. So I'm looking.
Yeah, it's very difficult to really talk about that, because no matter where we are, we're always thinking of home. We're
Right.
always thinking of family. We're always connected to our loved ones. But the most disconnection that I feel is for the ones that we lost and have passed on. So, my father has been a really huge influence in my life. And to lose him 2 years ago, it's really hard for me to actually see what the future will look like for me, because I'm so focused in being connected to family and connected to my parents. And we make fun that Micronesian and Pacific Islanders, no matter how old we are, we're still under the influence of our parents. Like regardless, they have a strong hold on us. And today, to see the children today to be this disconnected is hardening, and I just pull my hair every day trying to figure out how can we bring them back to understand the value of who they are as their identity, and to really embrace the fact that they belong to two beautiful culture, that their own identity is important to ground them in order for them to be able to face the future. And I think that many of our children here, especially born outside of home, they really disconnected, the ones that they don't know. But I also find so much hope with the ones that are wanting to learn and grasp what it means to be part of a beautiful culture. So Emily, thank you so much for creating this and making this possible for, you know, amateur writers like me to be involved and share stories and poems and our culture to the next generation, because you know their whole way of learning is in the textbook and on social media. It's not the same as ours, where you know we can sit for hours and hours. I remember just sitting with Mama Yo, just listening to all the stories and that she tells, and that for me is like movie in my own mind, and that's not the same with these kids today. And to create this opportunities for them, I think it's just beautiful and heartwarming. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of this that you all do to make it possible for us.
Thank you for sharing those thoughts. You know, when you speak about those we've lost and your your dad, I'm reminded of a quote from Larry Rigatol Poe, who after the death of Jojo Peter says, he now becomes one more guiding star with our ancestors to sail by. We will carry on their legacies of making a difference. And I think all of us in this space are working towards carrying on those legacies. And what I love about this anthology is that this is one way that we can do that and ensure that our legacies and our connections to home are sustained and maintained. And Emily, we're so grateful to you for the opportunity. And you have a poem about connection to home?
Kunisaucha for Ino, and thank Sujus Masi Mary. I have this, well, I was thinking of the title when I was trying to choose what poem to read today, or what poems to read today. I was thinking of the Carrying Culture, Micronesian Voices of Life, and I was thinking, for me, what carries culture for me? And I think primarily it's language. You know, speaking Pohnpei is kind of really important, especially if you're living away. That's the one thing that you can carry inside of you that you know is yours. And it can really, for me, it always give me a kind of strength to know that I had my language, you know, wherever I went, and no one can take that away from me. Kind of that always gave me strength. And I think our elders, because as Miss Eno said, they live on with you, their memory, and that also can give you strength. And then obviously I'm really into body ornamentation and clothing, and that's another way that you can maintain or try to hold on to your identity if you're away from home. But I thought I would read a poem that is about an elder that all of us look up to, Papa Mao. And I wrote it when he passed away, which is, I think, maybe in 2013 or something. Yeah, so it's called Star Language. You are now an uso, one of the brightest. My eyes squint to see you, nan matawo, beyond the reef. You are fearless, you men of the ocean usually are, trusting the current, wind, birds, smell of the rain, schools of fish, comforted by danger, home in the quiet isolation of vastness and depth. My friend says her fisherman goes to see the mermaids. You left your little atoll for volcanic Hawaiian islands. Barely speaking English, you went. Who needs language when your mind expands the Milky Way? When you still dream as your ancestors did? When you sail alongside those first voyagers? Only your people from outer islands of Yap and Chuuk kept this sacred knowledge sacred. Your people never forgot. Words mean little with such manaman. Did you know you were holding the light? It was your usu, Nainoa, and so many others would follow. It is your usu up there I see at Matariki, here in Aotearoa. This lonely Micronesian thinks of you.
It's beautiful. And I think a tribute to Papa Mao is a perfect way to close that segment of our program. All right, and now we welcome questions from our invited guests, questions or reactions or responses to our poets. And we'll start with Dr. Monica Labriola.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you to Mary for inviting me and to the organizers. And thank you, Terry, Emily, and Inocenta for your amazing poems. So my question is, in addition to being amazing and beautiful works of art, your poems and essays are also wonderful and powerful teaching tools. And of course, I've used Emily's My Uros with my undergraduate students, and I've had graduate students read the entire Indigenous Literatures from Micronesia volume, and both are really powerful and really open students' eyes who might not see otherwise. And I'm just wondering if, in addition to the poems or essays that you've already shared, if you can speak about how maybe you hope or would hope that your writing would be used in classrooms, or do you have any that you might recommend that you would hope that teachers, especially in Hawaii, would use to teach about culture, about women, about discrimination, and so many other issues that are important to you? That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. That's a great question. We have a couple of panelists who teach writing. Maybe you want to respond first, Terry or Emily.
I actually, well, because I teach composition. I don't teach like a literature-based course. I teach composition at UOG. But in terms of the piece that I wrote, I like to remind people that the political and the personal are very intertwined. And sometimes I think that the self-examination kind of literature and understanding self and having and teaching and encouraging students, right, to kind of here I'll talk about how I teach research. When I tell students to pick a research topic, I tell them, please don't pick a topic out of the air because you wrote about it in high school, or it's a, you know, I'm like, there needs to be a reason, there needs to be grounding for this, there needs to be a relevance to this topic. So what is it? And let's explore it. And to me, that's what I feel. If we write about the personal, if we write about who we are grounding ourselves. And however we define that circle of self, if it starts here, it radiates here in your heart, and it encompasses a bigger thing that is also self, right? So I think that's how I would like my piece to be shared. And yeah, it's about the floating world, it's about liminal spaces. That was very personal. That was something that I thought of, that I thought, oh, this is something I grapple with. Who else grapples with this? Because I love being in the in-between spaces, but maybe not everybody does, right? And so it's really about, some people freaking hate it and just want to stab it and kill it, right? But I think that's what I hope the piece is used to do, to kind of say, let's ground and see who we are, who I am as a person, and how I define that first, and then to move outward. Gosh, I sound like I'm teaching my research class. So anyway, so that's my answer.
Ino, do you want to say something first, or? Well, I haven't taught for a few years now, so I may be a bit rusty in explaining what I used to do. But when I was teaching in Hawaii, poetry courses, but also I taught a Pacific literature course, and I tried to I taught a lot of creative, well, when I taught the Pacific literature course, I really intertwined the creative and the critical, and I taught like personal essays and poems alongside like critical scholarly essays, and also would show, you know, a YouTube video of like Kathy Jetno Kitchener. And so I think I would try to use various media and to also show the connections between Micronesians, Polynesians, Melanesians, and really try to break down those boundaries and show that, you know, those are colonial constructions, and we don't see ourselves that way, but it's all a product of colonialism. And so I try to break down those barriers, and in my syllabi and what I used to teach. Yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, but that's what I used to try to do, but it's been a while now, so I can't. Now I'm in a different realm. But thank you so much for teaching the books. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Ino, do you want to respond? You have some children's stories.
Well, yeah, in Pacific Voices, we sort of like just focus on many of the stories that we know to share with the kids. I just talk story with the kids, and I don't talk about my poem. I did do the chant, like most of the things I do with the kids that I'm around is hands-on. So I do a lot of the stick dance, the traditional way, and you know, because law enforcement is my background, I literally do. I would pass out my whistle to control them and make sure, you know, I have five to middle schoolers. So you can imagine how crazy and fun it's like in our classroom. And you cannot even hear your own voice. You have to be shouting on top of everyone else. So I pass out my whistle, and I use it to you know, get their attention. And if they don't pay attention, I trap them 5 push-ups for not listening to me. And we just make it fun as we do it. And I think that them hearing stories from back home, it's even funny when I ask them to draw pictures of canoes or boat. Like I would have them imagine, I would tell a story and have them imagine it, and then after it they will draw it. And then the pictures that they have, the old way of dress is like today's clothing, because they have no idea. So yeah, you know, sharing those videos, like social media is really big on just having those connections. So Kathy Jetno's you know, poems are really powerful for them to hear, but also just seeing some clips from back home that encourages students. And I have some students that went back home, and you know, they don't want to return because they just love the life that they have there. And I'm trying to incorporate the reality of what life experience is like back home for the kids over here too. And I'm sorry, I don't know what else to to say with college students because I deal with really, really young children, but that's what I do. I hope that answers.
Thank you. Perfect. Heather, would you like to ask your question?
Okay, I have a question for Terry. So earlier you spoke about the spirits being dead in Seattle and that feeling of disconnection while being away. And I just wanted to ask for your advice for young tomorrows navigating their identity in the diaspora.
Wow, I think maybe this could be a generalized question for everyone, like advice for diaspora. If I should go first. Thank you, Heather, for the question, Ms. Garrido. When I lived in Seattle, the term diaspora didn't exist because I'm old. I'd be old, people. So I didn't know what that was. And I knew of people who gathered together, who celebrated and who did things. And every now and then I got invited to a family fiesta far away, for whatever reason. But I didn't, the line, "the spirits are dead here," meant mostly the spirits that I know are dead in Seattle. I don't know the spirits that are there. So they're dead to me, but I was okay with that. And I think that's the first stanza in that poem is supposed to be like, that's the other Terry who lives in the city, who is, and it's a weird thing. And I don't know if this is advice. I think it's just about being okay with the space, because it's about, right? Because it's the first thing that is if you've lived on Guam and you've moved elsewhere, or you lived in your Pacific home and you moved elsewhere, the space needs to be dealt with. That's the immediacy is, what is this? What is this land? Where are the coconut trees are gone? Everything is different. So it's about being okay with the fact that it's different. And they may not be okay with you. I can't control the other. And that's a different set of problems. But I had to be okay with the weirdness. And that wasn't instant. So advice, oh my God, I'm sorry, that sucks. I just had to deal with being in a different space and protecting. That's it. I protected who I was. I didn't tell people about Guam. I didn't want to. I felt it wasn't their business. So I really protected it and I kept it mine. And I like what Emelihter said about language and ancestors and memory. For me, I'm very Po'asu and Chamorro. I can't speak it, but I have memories of my dad's siblings and their lives together and their conversations that I didn't understand, but I didn't care that I didn't understand it. And that kept me okay in the big city. So, but I'm sure other, like Miss Eno and Emily, have lots of different responses about how to deal and advice for diaspora communities.
Thanks, Terry. Should we start with Emily and then Eno?
I was waiting for Miss Eno to go first. Oh gosh, it's a hard question. Seems simple, but it's deceptively difficult to answer, Well, I've lived all over the place. Most recently, I was living in Germany and Italy. And that's the farthest away I've ever lived from home. I don't know. I feel like living in Europe is really hard to compare to living in the States, because the States, I feel like it's such an American world and everything is like in English too. Whereas in Europe, it's like this country, the EU is all these different people who speak all different languages. And I felt ignorant in Europe because people speak at least 2 languages there. Usually they speak 3 or 4. So I only speak 2. So I was like, and my partner, he speaks like 5 languages. so it's just like gives you perspective, I think, about your identity. Like I focus, I think, in some ways less on my identity. And I always felt like in Hawaii, I focused more on my identity because there's something about Hawaii that makes you focus on your identity. But it's, for me, it was not necessarily in a healthy way. I don't know if that makes sense. But yeah, I think kind of similar to Terry too, where I keep certain things about myself inside, and that's like my special space. And I don't, of course, I do share things about myself, but not too much. I want to keep it hidden for myself. It's also like a lot of Pohnpeians are like this. They say like kokonlo. It's like you keep things to yourself to protect yourself. And I think that's one way to survive is away from home, is to keep those precious things safe in you. And you don't have to necessarily share things about yourself with other people. I'm happy not always sharing things about myself. And I think that's why a lot of times I struggle with social media, because I'm not in the generation, like I'm almost 40. So I didn't grow up with Facebook and all of that. So I feel uncomfortable sharing too much about myself. Where I see these younger Micronesians and Pacific Island, they're very comfortable posting pictures that I feel are disrespectful and things on there that I feel really uncomfortable with. So I think it's also generational too. But I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Thank you. That was helpful. Inocenta.
There is a saying in the Chuukese language, is say, "Whangaro ngelikitie pokete." It's like you give, but you leave a little bit in your pocket so you don't have an empty pocket. And that's literally like, you know, how it is. We share of ourselves, but not so much. And I think it's really also the age that we're born in, because me too, like, you know, my generation, or I've brought up that it's not good to talk about yourself. So I always like lose track, and I don't know what to say when I have to explain who I am. And I think it's just cultural, like focusing on ourselves is not something very important. And I find myself having hard time in that area too. But sharing my culture is something different. You know, like I'm proud of my culture, my clan, and my identity. And that I would turn the table on others and ask, like, what is your clan? Like, well, your village is not your clan. Like, some people will identify themselves with a village and it's not, or their island. And understanding the clan is very important. And it's almost like your spirituality, your connectivity to your ancestor, to where you belong. And so that spiritual factor for me is very important, that I make sure that when I talk with the younger generation, I want them to understand that there is a spirit of everything. And our protocol, which is first honor the heaven, your maker. First and foremost, you have to know that all the blessings that you have is given from the highest, you know, authority, and that it's a privilege for us to even be alive in this world. The land that is our second protocol, to honor the land that gives us food and sustains us, is as important as the ocean that we identify with, or that it also sustains us, and it doesn't disconnect us but connect us as one. And in understand that, it's also understanding who we are as people. And so we have to respect and honor each other in order to survive wherever we're at. I don't know if that answers, but I think the whole spirituality to this is very, very vital and important in our growth and wherever we are. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. That leads nicely into a question that another poet from Pohnpei has, and I'm going to ask this on her behalf because she is in the middle of weaving right now and is tuning in. So Carol Ann Carl has a question for all of the panelists. Why is poetry the medium you use to share your stories and connect with audiences? Perhaps we can start with Terry.
I write all things. Poetry, I think, sometimes aligns with how I think about things. So I think in snatches, and I think in bits and pieces, and stories. I don't know. I think maybe stories, maybe I'm lazy. I don't know. And that's not fair. I am sorry. I'm being silly because I don't know the answer. I like writing in all modes, but sometimes, again, if I'm thinking in however I'm thinking and it aligns with the poem, sometimes I'm not setting out to write a poem, right? Because genre is, again, someone spoke about constructs. We know genre is a construct, and it's a construct that is not probably anywhere near what Pacific Islanders even think about in terms of categorizing things. So I write, I think, however, and maybe that's not a good answer. So sometimes it's poems, sometimes it's a story that could be a poem, or a poem that sounds like a story, or whatever.
Thanks, Terry. Inocenta, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, I'm like Terry. It's also what comes in mind, but at the same time, I don't want to worry about grammars. So it just flow. I feel like poem speaks more to how you feel. And so I just, like, sometimes when I'm writing is poetry or whatever, I tend to think in that way, where it whatever flows, then it comes naturally like that. Or sometimes, like I say, I don't want to worry about grammar, and just even in this particular poem, I was trying to actually, the part where it talks about the relationship of a man and a woman, I had to change it to fit what my family would agree to it. So I changed lover to men, just so that I don't have to worry about some of the grammars or some of the things that is not, I don't know how to say it. Maybe if I say it in my language, it would be different. I would say it differently. than if I write it. But it's just sometimes if I think in my first language, when I write it out to translate it, it comes out different. So I think it's also part of that. Not wanting to be worried about the way I write, but just something that flows with how I feel. So thank you for that question, Carol.
Thank you for that answer, Eno. Emily, would you like to answer Carol's question as well?
Kailangan ng paytak, Carol. Yeah, similar to Terry and Miss Eno, I think I found my voice in poetry, and it just feels natural. I'm not one of those people. I always tell people I didn't start writing poetry as a child or anything like that. I mean, a lot of poets say, well, I started writing my first poem when I was 7 or when I was 5. I am not like that. I wasn't reading or writing or anything when I was a child. I was outside playing. I didn't start writing really creatively until I studied at UH Manoa. And I took some creative writing classes because I was an English major. And I had a poetry teacher, Juliana Spar, and I always give her credit for turning me into a poet because she was just a great teacher. And I feel like I found my voice through her teaching and the reading she gave us. And yeah, but yeah, similar to Terry and Eno, like I feel like poems are a snapshot for me. Like I'll have an idea and sometimes I'll think about it for years. Like the poem that I read today, the new one about the bus ride, is based on something that happened to me in Hawaii when I was going to UH, and I was riding the bus, and it still stayed in me, the story, but I never wrote about it. And then a friend of mine is putting together some writings in Pidgin. So it's the first poem I ever wrote in Pidgin before. And that story like came out, but I hadn't thought about it for years. So I think that's what's nice about poetry is like you can sit with the ideas and then one day it'll just come out. I don't know if that happens to other writers, but that's kind of my experience with poetry. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And we have time for one last question. And I'm going to ask Leana Naholava'a, also a poet and a writing teacher, to go ahead and ask your question.
Ndunkalina Sus Masi, Mahalo Nui Loa, Mary, Innocenta, Emily, and Terry. This has been and Honolulu Museum of Art. This has been such a healing gathering, and I love thinking about stories and storytellers and writers. And so my question is about what storyteller has been important in your life. It could be an actual writer that's inspired you, or I'm also just interested in like someone who told you stories orally and they were significant to you because of healing or because they were funny or anything like that. Thank you.
Terry, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to start?
Sorry, that was unmuted because I wanted to say, I love you, Lay, but I really want to defer to anybody else who wants to talk first, Miss Eno or Emily.
Okay, Eno or Emily?
Well, the elder that I actually wrote the Silent Warrior for, which is Mama Yo, she is an inspiration for me in so many things. In fact, for me to get stories from her, I would collect coconut and bring coconut to her hut to tell a story, or collect cigarette butts so that she can wrap her own cigarette. And when I go to church, I would be looking on the ground for cigarette butts, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I have to have a session with Mama Yo because she tells such beautiful stories. And I would interrupt her all the time because my mind is going ahead of myself, and I would ask her, like, so did the guy did this, and did he how come only the women are performing to dance to get a husband? Why the men don't perform to, like those kind of questions? But she will just tell me, you want to hear the story or not? And yeah, I want to hear it. And then she'll continue. And I'm that kid who will run to the radio and sit by the radio exactly 6 p.m. because I want to listen to the stories that are being told on the radio. Like there's a segment back in those old days where we have a radio jock that will literally tell story on the radio, and I just lost myself in those stories by imagining what it looks like, or what the stories are really feels like, because I love hearing stories. And I grew up around elders, and my whole island literally raised me, because I'm every summer I'm always on the island, and they know that I'm there to have vacation, and everybody just wanna tell me what's going on. And I love hearing stories and sharing the stories and the experiences that I have on the island, that I hope that the kids that I share with would get to feel and love the stories that I'm sharing with them too. So I don't even know if I answered the question, but I'm inspired by elders.
That's beautiful. And you're a great storyteller as well. Emily.
Sorry, what was the question again? Can someone repeat it to me?
Storyteller in your life.
Yes, I'm sorry, Liana. Oh gosh, I think there are like certain people that raised me, or that I grew up with, who were wonderful storytellers, and their stories and their voices like live on in me, and I try to kind of keep them alive through my poems. One of the people, she's sort of become she's a muse for me in my writing, and her name is her title. She is a very high status woman in Pohnpei, and her title was Nanep. So I have a series of poems about Nanep, and she was like a grandmother to me. And she was a very powerful woman, but also like extremely funny. And she just had the most wonderful sense of humor. And that's what always stays in my head. And she was extremely charming. Like she could charm any person into getting what she wants. And she was very fearless. She could approach anyone because she had this gift for charming people with her language. And she could give these wonderful speeches, In Pohnpei, the speech making is such a way of life. So especially the high title people, they're so used to giving speeches and talking in front of people, and that language is so beautiful. And yeah, so I think those are the kind of storytellers that influence me in my poetry or in my upbringing.
Thank you. And Terry, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, Lei, thank you for saying storyteller, because it's, I have favorite writers, and I can remember reading the Little House books in elementary school, and Laura Ingalls was very much a part of my childhood. But the storytelling aspect of my life goes even further back, right? I was lucky enough to be raised. I love to say this because I say this a lot. I utter this a lot because I feel it was the biggest gift that I was given in my life, was that my father was born in 1918 and his siblings were born in 1914 or in the early 20s. And so these are my aunts and uncles, and these are the stories and the storytellers that I was around. These were people who were already old during World War II. Do you know how much of a blessing that is? That those are the stories those were my first storytellers. And they were insulting. They were like, they insulted me, they insulted each other, they poked fun, they got angry, they told dark whispered, gossip stories about scandals. And these were the things. And they sometimes, if I was allowed in, they would speak English. Oftentimes it was Chamorro, but a lot of times they were the ones I wanted to be like. I wanted to tell funny stories, because when they did pull us in, like us meeting my cousins who are like 60, my first cousins are old, right? Because my aunts and uncles are old, but they're like 60, 75, these cousins, they would pull us in and they would tell us stories. It was always about making fun of somebody, making fun of one of us. And we would laugh, because that's Cassie, right? And Chamorro, they're poking fun at somebody who deserves it, whatever. And I'm thinking, I want to be like that. I want to tell stories like that. They're funny. They're brilliant. They were smart people. And like Emily was saying, it's like there's a charm to that. There's this, wow, how can I be like that? I'm so jealous. I want to tell stories like that. And so I think that, to me, that's where it began. That really young childhood exposure to a lot of people who liked telling stories already around all of us, in English or not, whether you understood it or not, it didn't matter. But they were captivating people.
And they had a great impact on your life because you're a wonderful, beautiful storyteller as well. Thank you so much for those great questions and your reactions, responses, and thank you for your thoughtful answers and for sharing your wisdom and your passions with us, our poets. I want to turn it over now to Taylor Chang to close us out.
I mean, just infinite amounts of gratitude to all of you, to Emelihter, Innocenta, Terry, Mary, for leading and guiding us through this program, and for every single guest, and for sharing the space with us, and for asking all their questions, and for just being connected in this space. This has been incredibly life affirming and inspiring, and it's a real honor to be connected with everybody, even if virtually. But it means a lot, and I just on behalf of everybody, just thank you so much for what you've given and what you shared today, and may it continue to resonate beyond this space. So thank you all, and till next time, and there will be a next time. Thank you again,